You're on.
Hello, baseball fans. This is James Scott. This is the Baseball Show. Um, we've been covering statistics in the past. We might do one of those later today. But I'm going to examine, based on the up and down state of the Yankees over the last few weeks, something that many Yankee fans have been critiquing. Yankee fans always are yelling about this guy needs to get fired, this, that, and the other thing. Most recently, fans have been more critical than I think ever of Brian Cashman. It probably has a lot to do with the Pineda trade with Montero, but I decided I was going to take a look at Cashman's moves, past and present, to figure out really if he does need to get fired, if he is a bad GM, which I'm utterly convinced he is not. So, best moves, Brian Cashman. I have it written down here on my other computer, so I'll be looking down and up this whole time. Signing Mike Mussina. At the time, the Yankees already had very good pitching. I believe it was in the winter of 2000. They signed him just in time for 2001 and everything. And he was a very, very good pitcher for us for the entire time he was here. Unfortunately, he retired the year before we won the World Series in 2009, so he didn't get his ring. Signing Russell Martin when Posada was deemed not a catcher, when he stopped becoming good defensively. That was, at the time, nobody thought that was a very significant move. Because Martin had been injured the last few years for the Dodgers. 3 years prior, I believe, to them signing him, he was a fantastic catcher, one of the best in the majors. He actually had a lot of speed, too. I believe he stole 18 bases one season for a catcher, which is extraordinary. But everybody thought, he's going to be injured, this, that, or the other thing. But Cashman kind of, he unearthed a diamond from the rubble that was in that free agent class as far as catchers go. And Martin's been dependable defensively for us over the last few years. And a solid bat. No, he's definitely not going to be Posada. Nobody there's not very many catchers in the game that can hit like Posada. But he was league average for us. Two other moves that have gone completely by without anybody even realizing that they even happened, that Cashman did, was after the Yankees missed out on Cliff Lee, which was a big deal about a year ago, he went out and he signed Freddie Garcia and Bartolo Colon. And those guys ended up coming in and pitching extraordinarily. Much better than even Brian Cashman himself admitted he thought they would when he signed them. But it was him signing them, and he did recognize the talent. He did trust his evaluators. So there's another positive move that he's made. Signing Sabathia, that's a no-brainer. Signing Teixeira, that's a no-brainer. Signing El Duque out of Cuba, incredible move. Maybe he was 48, maybe he was 49 when he was pitching. Nobody really knows his exact age, but he was one hell of a pitcher playing for us, and he was one of the reasons we won some of the championships we won in the 90s. Signing Matsui, it's important to note when I'm talking about him signing Matsui that there wasn't a posting system at the time, and Matsui was like a free agent under all of the rules. And there was a lot of teams competing for him, and the Yankees ended up getting him. That was a brilliant move. He was outstanding for us for the entire time he was here, and without him we probably wouldn't have won Game 6, because he drove in 7 runs, I believe, in 2009, and won us the World Series. He got the World Series MVP. Trading Wilson Betamine and a no-name prospect for Nick Swisher in the offseason before 2009. That's also something that nobody discusses. The Yankees got Nick Swisher essentially for nothing. Now, Wilson Betamine, he's had, a few good years as a bench player, but dead honest, like a year or two of Wilson Betamine for the 3 years we got out of Nick Swisher, that's beyond a steal. I don't even understand how we got a player of his caliber for that little amount of talent. I believe the other player, and it was somebody like Jason Marquez or somebody like that. I believe he's only gotten a few innings, a handful of innings in the big leagues, and he hasn't done anything. Yankees trading 4 no-name prospects for Bobby Abreu. We got 2 years out of Abreu, and he was outstanding while he was here. People always remember him as being the guy who was actually afraid of outfield walls, but he was one heck of a consistent hitter, and he fit the Yankees' model of being not only like a good person in the clubhouse, but somebody who can work counts. We traded the 4 prospects we traded. None of them have made it to the major leagues, as far as I know. So that's easily a win by the Yankees. Trading A.J. Burnett to the Pirates this offseason. I didn't think at the beginning of the offseason anybody would want to take A.J. Burnett. But not only did we get to trade him, we got 2 players in return. I don't think those players are going to really amount to anything. But we got 2 players in return. And the Pirates ate some of his contract, which is extraordinary because that was the big issue. Because he was being paid $16.5 million a year to play for us. And he was doing nothing. So we got rid of him. That was an extraordinary move by Cashman as well. The A-Rod trade, the first A-Rod trade, where we traded Soriano for him. Those years where we had him between, I believe, 2003 and 2007, before he signed his extension, he on-base percentage over 400, and he had an amazing batting average. He had some of the best years of like any hitter within those years. But that takes us right into his Brian Cashman's worst moves. One of the worst moves, connecting the good moves to the bad moves, is after A-Rod's contract was up, signing him to the 10-year extension. That was a horrible move. Don't sign anyone who is just out of their prime to a 10-year extension. Because, maybe you'll get 4 or 5 years out of that, but the last few years on that are going to be really rough. I mean, if A-Rod has a good season this year, he still could, and he could still be good for the end of the contract. But taking into account that last year he was being paid $1.20 a second, I don't think any baseball player or any human is worth that much unless you've unless you're like the inventor of the internet. So that was one of his worst moves. Signing Feliciano and Marte to multi-year deals. These happened over the last few years. Marte's not under contract anymore. I believe Feliciano's not going to be under contract anymore this offseason. But Cashman over the last few years has had a kind of fixation with good left-handed relief pitching. And the players he's tend to have just gotten injured. Marte got injured. He did have that amazing moment in the 2009 World Series where he struck out, I believe, Utley and Howard back-to-back. That really saved an inning or two. Might have saved the game, actually. But for the amount of money he was being paid, it's not worth it. And the amount of years, he wasn't worth it either. So those were 2 of the issues. 2 of the signings that weren't that good. The Burnett signing at the beginning was an incredible deal, but the last 2 years, like the first year was amazing, but the last 2 years of the Burnett deal were horrible. Thankfully, Cashman was able to make up for it by trading Burnett away this offseason. Other bad move, Ted Lilly for Jeff Weaver. Jeff Weaver sucked when he was a Yankee. But at the same time, you kind of have to think, the way Lilly pitches, Lilly's a fly ball pitcher, an extreme fly ball pitcher. He might not have done that well with the Yankees also. So, I mean, it's kind of a give and take. Pavano and Igawa, probably the 2 biggest mistakes of Cashman, other than the A-Rod signing. Also terrible moves. But at the time, you got to look at, the Yankees were coming off a season where they didn't have any pitching at all. And Pavano was the best pitcher out there. He'd come off 2 consecutive 200-inning seasons where he was above average. I believe he had 19 wins the season before we signed him to that contract. So we didn't really know what could happen. Igawa, though, there's no excuse for it. He was a reactionary move from the Daisuke Matsuzaka trade, or rather signing that the Red Sox did. Reactionary signings or trades always tend to be not that good. There's very rare times where a reactionary signing or trade turns out to be well. The first and second Javier Vasquez trade. Before we signed, or before we traded for Javier Vasquez in the first place, he looked like the ideal pitcher for the Yankees to get. And in fact, if it was me, I would have made that trade in the first place either way. The way it turned out, though, was Nick Johnson and Juan Rivera ended up beyond outproducing Javier Vasquez in Yankee uniform, and we ended up trading him away for, I think it was Randy Johnson. The second Vasquez trade was a lot worse than the first one because we didn't learn from our mistakes, like that he doesn't work well in the Yankee uniform. And we ended up trading away 3 valuable pieces. We ended up trading away Mike Dunn, power left-handed reliever. I believe he's playing for the Marlins now. He over the next year, if Heath Bell continues to stumble, he might end up being their closer, their full-time closer. Melky Cabrera, who had an extraordinary year with the Royals last year, actually was right in line with where Robinson Cano was producing in terms of just overall numbers. He had over 200 hits. Cano, I think, had over 200 hits. They both hit in the high 300s, both similar everything, except Cano hit for a little more power. People don't really think about that because he was on the Royals. People don't notice that. And now he's going to the Giants, and he's one of the better hitters in all of baseball. Thankfully, the Yankees have a chance to undo their mistake there because Cabrera's going to be hitting free agency soon. And the third player in that deal who the Yankees would regret trading is Aroldis Vizcaino. Everybody's going to be like, who, when they hear his name? He was a top prospect, but he was a very low-level top prospect. He was in A-ball for us when we did the trade. And, you know, he's having Tommy John surgery this season, but he's a top prospect for the Atlanta Braves, and he's probably going to be starting for them for the next, 10 years, if he can keep healthy. He throws 97 miles an hour. He's a very, very good pitcher, which tends to be what the Yankees are always lacking. Young, good pitching. Last bad trade or signing transaction overall that Cashman ended up doing was the Tabata and 3 other prospect trade for Nady and Marte. Nady and Marte were only going to be under contract for 1 year, and it was already halfway through the season, so basically it's a half year for both of them. Half year for a reliever tends to be something like, 25 innings. And for a hitter, it tends to be 300 at-bats. So almost, I'm going to say, 2 full wins at best, what they really contributed that year. And Tao now the starting, I think, left fielder or starting right fielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And he's like, he's still very young, so everything hasn't really come into being. But projection systems a year ago had him at 37 steals, which is really significant. But looking back on all of those moves, the good moves, there's a lot more good moves than there are bad moves. It's clear just by looking at the good and bad moves, players that turned out versus players that didn't turn out, just all of that Cashman is one of the better GMs in the game. I'd argue that he's probably the best GM in the game because, he has the money to, he has the money to make mistakes. So he can take more risks than other GMs. The only thing is, because it's New York and everything is scrutinized, any tiny mistake is going to be blown out of proportion. And if you look at all of his bad moves, at the time, those bad moves would have been good moves. Everybody, pretty much in baseball, every GM in baseball, if handed that situation, would have made that move. And just turned out wrong. The only moves, in all honesty, that are kind of unforgivable are the 10-year A-Rod deal, the relief pitchers to multi-years deal, and the reactionary Igawa signing. There's still a few moves that haven't really. We can't tell if it's good or bad. The Montero for Pineda trade, We're going to be able to reassess that 5 years down the road because everybody in that trade is still so young. And actually, the Granderson, Kennedy, and Jackson trade that happened at the winter of 2009/2010. That's the other trade that in about 5 years we're going to be able to figure out whether it was a good trade or bad trade. Each of you can take what you want from this video. Try to assess Cashman in your own way. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. I'd like to hear your opinions. Leave them in